Picture this. You're traveling somewhere completely new, the sun is shining, the architecture is stunning, and, you strike up a friendly interaction with a local.
Sounds like a dream so far.
Right. And you want to show your appreciation, so you give them this big, enthusiastic gesture, like maybe a thumbs up or the classic OK sign. And instantly, their face just drops. The warmth totally vanishes.
Oh, man, the temperature in the room just completely plummets. You can literally feel the oxygen leave the space.
Exactly. You experience that sudden stomach-dropping realization that, you haven't just made a little tourist faux pas. You've profoundly offended someone.
Yeah.
And you have absolutely no idea how you did it or what invisible line you just crossed.
It is the ultimate traveler's nightmare. But I mean, it happens constantly because travel isn't just about, showing up, looking at beautiful monuments and eating new food.
Right.
You're stepping into an entirely different set of invisible social rules. Every culture operates on this unique social contract. And if you don't know the terms of the agreement, well, you're going to violate them.
Which is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are setting out to decode the hidden social contracts of the world.
It's a big mission.
It is. But the goal is to figure out how to step off a plane not just as a wide-eyed observer, but as a really respectful global citizen. And we're pulling our insights today from an incredibly practical guide written by Anita L. Hummel.
It's a fantastic piece.
It really is. It's an April 2026 post from the blog A Bus on a Dusty Road, and it's titled Embracing Local Customs. She has decades of on-the-ground experience, and she breaks down the stark realities of what happens when these differing cultural operating systems just collide.
What makes this particular guide so compelling is that it moves way past the superficial idea of simply avoiding embarrassment. It actually treats cultural adaptation as a fundamental practice of mutual respect.
Absolutely.
When you participate appropriately in local customs, you're actively honoring traditions that these communities have carefully maintained for centuries. You're signaling that you recognize their culture is the dominant one in that space.
And functionally, that adapting is the only key that unlocks those richer, authentic interactions. The ones that are totally walled off to the stereotypical ugly tourist.
Exactly. And the friction begins the very moment you share a physical space with someone.
Right. Before you even unpack your bags or see a museum, you have to actually greet another human being. This initial contact is where we see the most drastic variations.
Oh, definitely.
So let's look at the physical calculus of a greeting. Like in Japan, the expectation is a slight bow, with the depth of the bow increasing to show respect for elders or figures of authority.
Right. It's very structured.
But then you cross over to France, and the rule shifts entirely. Friends exchange a kiss on each cheek. But if you offer that to a stranger, you've totally crossed a boundary. Strangers get a handshake.
Yeah, you're navigating a highly specific spectrum of intimacy and hierarchy there. And the mechanics of those gestures matter deeply. Like, the guide highlights the Middle East, where handshakes are standard, but using your left hand is a massive violation of social norms. It's considered deeply unsanitary and just incredibly impolite.
Right, and it's so important to understand the why behind that. Because in historically arid environments, before modern plumbing, hand functions were strictly segregated for hygiene.
Right.
The right hand was reserved for eating and greeting, while the left was strictly for personal sanitation. So offering your left hand isn't just a quirky mistake.
No, not at all.
It actually triggers a visceral disgust response.
Yeah.
You are effectively offering someone the physical representation of impurity.
Exactly. The historical context codifies into this modern moral behavior. And once we move from physical contact to silent body language, the rules become even more localized.
Oh, tell me about it.
Consider how physical geography is mapped onto the human body. In Thailand, the head is considered the sacred highest point of the body, both literally and spiritually. So touching someone's head is highly offensive.
Wow.
Conversely, the feet are the lowest, most unclean point. Pointing your feet at a person or a religious object is a profound insult.
Yeah, the guide notes that in Middle Eastern cultures, simply crossing your legs in a way that shows the soles of your feet to someone while you're sitting, that's a sign of disrespect.
It's all about awareness of your limbs.
It really is. But the gestures that absolutely fascinate me are the ones that completely invert our ingrained cognitive mapping. Take that OK sign I mentioned at the beginning, forming a circle with your thumb and forefinger.
Right, the universal sign for all good here.
Exactly.
Right.
In the West, it signals that everything is perfect. But in Greece, that gesture is considered intensely vulgar.
Yeah, it traces back to a derogatory representation of a bodily orifice. So you think you're signaling satisfaction to a waiter, but you're actually delivering a severe insult.
It's wild. And then there's Bulgaria, where nodding your head up and down means no, and shaking your head side to side means yes.
That one always trips people up.
Right, because we map agreement to the vertical plane practically from birth. Reversing that requires immense conscious effort. To me, this physical body language is like a culture's source code.
That's a great way to put it.
You have this intricate programming running quietly in the background. If you input the wrong command, like nodding eagerly in Bulgaria, the social interaction just crashes.
That is a perfect framework. You're inputting commands that their operating system doesn't recognize, or worse, interprets as a malware threat.
So practically speaking, what does this mean for a traveler who's just trying to navigate a new city? Like, if the rules are this complex, isn't it safer to just act like a neutral statue?
A statue.
Yeah, if I just freeze, keep my hands in my pockets, maintain a completely blank demeanor until someone explicitly directs me, don't I avoid causing any offense at all?
Well, it's a logical instinct, but freezing actually sends its own unintended signal. In most human societies, physical rigidity and a lack of, kinesthetic response, that's interpreted as aloofness.
Oh, I see.
Or suspicion, or even hostility. You don't need to be perfectly fluent in their body language, but observation is your best tool.
Just take a beat to watch what locals are doing.
Exactly. When in doubt, a simple, warm smile and a polite, shallow nod are the safest universal defaults. But more importantly, the effort to adapt, even if it's clumsy, demonstrates empathy.
People recognize that effort.
They really do. Most people are remarkably forgiving of a faux pas if they recognize your underlying intention is rooted in respect.
That makes total sense. And that transition from microgestures to how we occupy larger public spaces, it's fascinating. Because once you successfully greet someone, you move into their environment.
Right.
Often, this means places of deep historical or religious significance. Which brings us to clothing. How we present our physical selves.
Our visual resume.
Exactly. And the guide is adamant that modesty is paramount across the board in sacred spaces. Like if you visit a Buddhist temple in Thailand, your shoulders and knees must be covered.
And you absolutely have to remove your shoes before stepping inside.
Right. But it isn't just an Eastern concept. To enter St. Peter's Basilica in Italy, the exact same rules apply to both men and women. Shoulders and knees covered.
We see a universal thread here where clothing acts as a communicator of values. Mosques require removing shoes to keep the prayer space pure, while Christian churches generally demand silenced phones, no flash photography, and modest dress.
Just to maintain an atmosphere of reverence.
Exactly. But as Hummel points out, this expectation often bleeds out of the sanctuary and into the public square.
Oh, absolutely.
In the Middle East, there's an expectation for women to wear abayas or cover their hair in public. And in India, modest attire is the standard preference for women, regardless of whether they're near a religious site or not.
Which leads to a highly practical recommendation from the author, The Emergency Scarf.
A lifesaver.
Truly. Keeping a versatile shawl in your day pack allows you to instantly adapt to a cathedral, a temple, or a conservative neighborhood without having to run all the way back to your hotel.
It's just smart packing.
But I want to push back on the underlying philosophy here for a second. Let's play devil's advocate. For a traveler who comes from a culture where clothing is a really vital tool for individual self-expression, does adhering to strict, highly conservative dress codes cross the line into self-erasure?
That's a deep question.
Like, especially ones that dictate how women must present themselves in places like the Middle East. Is it a betrayal of your own values to adopt theirs?
It is a profound tension, and, it's something many travelers really struggle with. But if we analyze this through the lens of being a guest, the perspective totally shifts.
Okay, how so?
Well, in the West, we largely view public space as a neutral zone for individual expression. But in many traditional cultures, public space is viewed as a shared collective sanctuary.
Interesting.
Clothing isn't about expressing your individual identity there. It's about maintaining community harmony.
So it's a fundamental difference in who actually owns the public space.
Precisely. Adhering to their dress code isn't an endorsement of their gender politics or a permanent abandonment of your own values. It's just a temporary suspension of your norms to acknowledge their right to govern their own spaces.
I really like that framing.
You're putting on a uniform of respect. You're signaling that for the brief time you're in their home, their collective comfort supersedes your individual expression.
A temporary suspension of your norms.
Yeah.
Yeah, framing it as a uniform of respect makes that cognitive dissonance way easier to navigate. Okay, so we've dressed the part, we've navigated the sacred landmarks. Now we move from public space into intimate space.
The dinner table.
Exactly. Eventually, you're going to sit down and share a meal.
The great universal human unifier.
It is. But the dinner table is heavily guarded by its own set of rules. For instance, the guide warns that in Japan, you must never, ever stick your chopsticks upright into a bowl of rice.
And the reason why is crucial. Upright chopsticks in a bowl of rice perfectly mimic the incense sticks placed in sand at a traditional Buddhist altar. Yeah, they use those to honor the dead. By doing it at the dinner table, you're essentially bringing the symbolism of a funeral into a place of nourishment. It is a jarring, morbid visual for your hosts.
Which completely ruins the meal.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, the guide points out that if you're eating noodles in Japan, slurping them loudly is completely acceptable. It's actually encouraged.
Right, which goes against everything we're taught.
In the West, slurping is terrible manners. But there, it aerates the noodles, enhances the flavor, helps cool the broth, and serves as an auditory compliment to the chef.
And meanwhile, in France, dining is a carefully curated, leisurely affair. Rushing through a meal or demanding menu substitutions is seen as an insult to the chef's expertise.
You just have to surrender to their pacing.
You're not just consuming calories, you're participating in a ritual.
And if dining rituals aren't complex enough, gifting is where the cultural nuances really collide. I think of gifting in a foreign culture like dealing with a completely different currency that has wildly fluctuating exchange rates.
That's a perfect analogy.
You might bring a lot of good intentions, but if you apply them to the wrong cultural currency, the value collapses.
Exactly. The physical object is entirely secondary to the cultural symbol it represents. The guide details how, in Japan, you must offer and receive gifts with both hands to show full engagement.
And you have to refuse it first, right?
Yes. It's standard practice to politely refuse a gift a few times before finally accepting it.
It's this required dance of humility. You see the same thing in China, where immediate acceptance implies greed. But the actual items you choose matter just as much.
Oh, completely.
The guide specifically warns against giving clocks or umbrellas in China. And again, understanding the why unlocks the rule.
Yeah.
In Mandarin, the phrase for giving a clock sounds exactly like the phrase for attending a funeral.
Yikes.
Right. And the word for umbrella sounds like the word for falling apart or separation.
So you're inadvertently handing them a physical manifestation of bad luck and death.
Not a great housewarming present.
Yeah, not at all. And this currency exchange analogy applies perfectly to the Middle East as well. The guide notes that bringing a lavish, expensive gift can easily be misconstrued as a bribe.
Which is a disaster.
But even if it isn't seen as corrupt, high-context cultures often operate on a strict system of reciprocity. If you give a wildly expensive gift, you burden the host with the obligation to match that value in the future.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
If they can't afford to, you've caused them a profound loss of face.
It's the ultimate irony of travel. You honestly want to be a polite guest. You think, I'll buy them a beautiful, expensive watch to say thank you.
And it completely backfires.
Your earnest attempt at generosity results in you symbolizing death, inflicting a financial burden, and causing them deep social embarrassment.
Which is why doing your homework before you travel is an absolute requirement, not just a suggestion. You cannot assume that your domestic definition of generosity applies universally.
Good intentions are incredibly fragile if they aren't backed by cultural literacy. Which brings us to the reality of the situation. Human error is inevitable. No matter how much homework you do, you're going to misread the currency exchange at some point. You will mess up.
We all do. The friction is built right into the experience.
And according to Hummel's guide, how a traveler handles that inevitable mistake is the dividing line between being a mere tourist and acting as a true global citizen.
Right.
The guide outlines several common pitfalls. Assuming everyone speaks English, ignoring modesty rules, or fundamentally misunderstanding tipping cultures.
Tipping is a fascinating example of cultural divergence. In America, leaving a large tip is the ultimate sign of appreciation.
It's practically mandatory here.
But in Japan, excellent service is simply a matter of professional pride. Attempting to tip can be highly offensive because it implies that the employer doesn't pay them fairly or that they require an extra financial bribe just to do their job properly.
Your generosity is received as condescension.
Exactly. It all comes back to assuming our own rules are the default setting for humanity.
So what is the protocol when you realize you've made a blunder? The guide is really clear. Stay humble, apologize sincerely, and immediately adjust your behavior.
And do your research beforehand.
Definitely. Don't be afraid to ask hotel staff or locals for guidance on the front end either.
It requires the humility to embrace being a beginner.
And there are tangible, real-world rewards for that humility. The guide shares stories of a tourist in Morocco who was warmly embraced by locals simply because they took the time to meticulously remove their shoes and dress appropriately at a mosque.
Small actions go a long way.
They really do. Another visitor in Japan was spontaneously invited to an incredibly intimate traditional tea ceremony just because they took the time to bow correctly and respectfully to an elder.
Those are the moments of authentic connection that money simply cannot buy. They are earned entirely through the currency of respect.
Now, on the topic of navigating these differences, particularly language, the guide recommends learning basic phrases and utilizing translation apps. But it emphasizes that body language and a warm smile carry you much further.
Absolutely.
This brings up a modern dilemma I want to get your perspective on. We all have these incredible translation tools on our phones now. We can point a camera at a menu and read it instantly, or speak into a microphone and have it output perfect syntax.
It's like magic.
It is, but are these apps robbing us of the experience? Are we losing that vulnerable, inherently human moment of trying and often miserably failing to speak a foreign language?
It's a very perceptive question because translation apps are undeniable marvels for logistics, safety, and basic navigation.
Oh, for sure.
But they act as an emotional buffer. When we rely solely on technology to achieve perfect efficiency, we bypass the psychology of vulnerability. When you stumble through a basic, heavily accented greeting in someone else's language, you are doing something profound with the power dynamic of that interaction.
You're intentionally placing yourself in a low-status position.
Exactly. You are stripping away your own competence and yielding the floor to them. That clumsy vulnerability is highly discerning. It builds trust across cultural divides faster than almost anything else.
Because it shows you're trying.
Right. Locals do not expect linguistic perfection from visitors. They expect effort. A flawless robotic voice emanating from a smartphone demonstrates efficiency, sure, but a clumsy, smiling, deeply human attempt, that demonstrates heart.
It shows you're willing to look foolish in order to meet them on their own terms.
Precisely.
The friction isn't an obstacle to the experience. The friction is the experience. If we synthesize all these insights from Hummel's guide, it becomes clear that adapting to local customs is the ultimate exercise in cognitive flexibility.
Whether it's deciphering the depth of a bow, understanding the symbolism of a gift, or fumbling through a new language,
it forces us to step outside the architecture of our own minds.
And that leaves us with a truly provocative question to consider. If travel requires us to temporarily adopt these new cultural operating systems, how does that repetition rewire our brains?
Oh, I like where this is going.
Does the immense effort we exert to understand and accommodate foreign cultures abroad permanently alter how we interact with the people in our own hometowns? Does learning to look past our own default settings make us more empathetic neighbors when we return?
That is a phenomenal thought to sit with. Does crossing borders out there dissolve the borders right here? We want to invite you to keep exploring these ideas and join our community of learners. Please subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel, sign up for the newsletter, and definitely check out our blog posts for more great information. Because the next time you find yourself in a cafe halfway across the world trying to strike up a friendly conversation, you'll know exactly how to read the invisible social contract.
And you won't ever have to experience that sudden, stomach-dropping realization again.